Hello, how are you? This is Wiedemann Sibit, or Ingvar Johannesson from Iceland, and I think I will cover the 2014 US Chess Championship here on my channel. I will try to do at least one video every 2 rounds. I will do one for every round if I can, but the plan is at least one video every 2 rounds. So, I've been following the US Chess Championship for a while. I think it's always an interesting tournament. I think I followed it more or less, since Kamsky started playing again, and the battle with Kamsky and Nakamura. Unfortunately, in recent years, or at least last year, Nakamura didn't play, and he's not playing this year either. So the big favorite going into this U.S. Championship is, of course, Gary Kamsky. Fantastic player and a former World Championship candidate. It's hard to imagine who can really, give him a hard time in this tournament. But on the other hand, there are a bunch of very strong players behind him, like Anichuk, Timur Gariev. I always like the Kopian, and you know, the field is strong, plenty of grandmasters. So Kamsky will have to do his work. So we'll see what happens. So in this first round, this is a round robin. We'll have a look at Timur Gariev with the white pieces against Gary Kamsky. Gariev, a strong player, rated 2653 UCF. I think he might be over 2600 FIDE. And Gary Kamsky with 2713. Oh, actually, they have the FIDE rating here on SEC. So 2713 is indeed Gary Kamsky's FIDE rating. I think he's rated 2778 UCF and USCF. And Gariev is probably a bit higher than the USCF ratings. So 2653 is a very respectable FIDE rating. It looked like both players were quite happy with the draw in this game. They played the Slav defense, and okay, the main line here is d takes c4, but Kamsky has always gone his own way. In a6 is the Stepanenko-Slav, a line that has been championed by some players from Moldova, like Bologan. It's a solid system, and Kamsky tends to go g6 in the Slav and transfer the battle into the middle game or end game, where he's really good. But Gariev went for c takes d5, which is the exchange Slav, and usually this might promise white very little slight edge, but usually what we most likely see is an even game. And well, unfortunately not much happened in this game, and like I said, probably both players were happy with the draw here. Knight sorry, pawn g5, bishop g3, knight h5, and here they started to repeat moves. Bishop e5, knight went back, bishop d3, knight h5. And the thing is, black doesn't really want to take, because I think we take with a pawn when this knight doesn't really have a bunch of good squares. And has to go back to g7 at some point. And after knight f6, then we can maybe think about taking on e5, gaining the bishop here. But yeah, because now if we take on e5, the knight goes d7, and it's not out of play, and then black has the bishop here, so they just repeat it here. And a quick draw. And I guess Timur Gariev was satisfied with the draw as well against the top seed. So let's quickly move on. Try to keep this as brief as possible. Mackenzie Muller with white against Alexander Ornichuk. They played the Queen's Indian defense. So yeah, knight c3, And bishop b4 is the Nimzo Indian, but then played the Queen's Indian. So b6 here is the Queen's Indian, bishop b4 is the Pogo Indian. And b6 was played, g3, bishop b4 check. Still the Queen's Indian, but you know, very similar positions when they can at times transpose. I would still call this a Queen's Indian. So c6, a typical move, trying to play d5 and get a foothold in the center. And as always in Nimzo and Queen's Indians, black will try to play a little bit for control over the e4 square. So what happened in this game was d5, knight to e5, an interesting move. Trying to put pressure on black here immediately. Yeah, the thing is that black can't develop now with knight b to d7 because of knight takes c6. So what can black do? I mean, if he castles, then maybe knight c3, e4, and black might have some problems. So he went for the immediate solution, knight after d7, challenging his knight. Knight went back to d3, offering this pawn. But on the other hand, after pawn takes c4, knight to b4, hits the bishop, hits the pawn. We can take a pawn, so this is a pawn sacrifice for white. If you go back to b7, I think white should have a fine position after pawn takes c4, but he took up the gauntlet, he took the pawn, so knight takes a6. And okay, black can also maybe give the pawn with b2, but he'll have to take on a6. And in this way he can defend the pawn on c6. If he had gone b2, let's go back. If he had gone b2, we take, knight takes, I know this is immediately hanging, so it's a question of a tempo, so therefore knight takes a6, knight back, and castles. So white is down a pawn, but I mean he's ahead in development. He has a really strong bishop on this diagonal. That's not that was not my intention. Bishop on this diagonal, strong rook with pressure here. He can develop this knight to a number of squares, maybe knight c3 to e4, you know, this might be vulnerable. Maybe knight a3 to c4, similar ideas. And in general, white seems to have good enough conversation. He went knight a3, a5, rook c1 attacking this pawn. And, you know, black has some problems still, you know, finishing development, getting these knights out. Still pressure on c6, so how do you finish development? You want knight c5 here. A tactical move. Of course, we have the spin, so we're talking the pawn on b3. So queen to b2. Unpinning, so now the knight must move. We want to a6. Hanging this b4 square, which is a nice outpost for the knight. But on the other hand, white cannot take on c6, regain the pawn, and that's what he did. If he didn't, then knight b4, and yeah, he has to take now. Otherwise, knight b4, we protect this pawn. This knight is standing well. Next, we can protect the pawn, and then think about developing this knight. And then white will regret not having used his pressure better. So he took the pawn, and white might still have some slight pressure, but it seems like black is quite okay. After rook c7, you know, ideally we would like to play e3 when we have this nice looking pawn structure, but the point is that knight d3 will fork queen and the rook, so we can't do that. So he had to give it with d4 pawn. But on the other hand, he got immediate pressure on b6. Two guys attacking this, and there's also back rank issues, so we can't defend like this because I think knight takes. He wants to take, then rook takes. Can't recapture because of back rank issues. So we're going to win the pawn back. Took on d6. And now black has to liquidate with a4, otherwise white will well put pressure on this pawn, maybe put the rooks on the 7th, so black doesn't really have a choice. And now we simply have 4 against 4, 4 against 4 on the king side, and this is a dead draw. So we played a few more moves and then agreed to a draw. So far no decisive results. Let's go on. Akopian against Naroditsky, Daniel Naroditsky, 18-year-old. Grandmaster, very talented player. But with the white player, white pieces, Varushan Akopian, a player that I liked for a while. Like his openings in this game, we have the Nimso, and he goes for Queen C2, the Capablanca line. Classical way to play for white. And as always, black will try and get control over this e4 square. That's the whole strategy with bishop e4, giving up this bishop, trying to get this e4 square under control. So let's see, pawn to a3, bishop takes c3, queen takes c3. And as you can see, white has, black has good control over this e4 square at the moment. F3, pawn takes c4 and b6, and this has been a fashionable line recently. Black wants to play bishop a6, and I believe that after bishop f4, black will sacrifice a pawn. He didn't go for that. Went bishop g5. I believe that after this, black is playing something like this, and simply getting good play here. It's not like rook c8. I'm not gonna, make any guarantees, but I think that's how I play. And this rook will get into c2, and black gets good play for the pawn. As far as I remember, I don't play this variation with either color, so not 100% sure. But okay, bishop g5, bishop a6, attacking the queen, and e7. Well, black has more or less finished development. He gave out the bishop here, but he gets a slightly quicker development in return. Maybe he'd like to free his game with pawn to c5. So what does white do? Knight e5. And I think it took. And it's a common theme here that we can unpin here by attacking the queen with knight d5 or knight e4 here, hitting the queen. So Prokopyan took on d8, he took the queen back, and now went back to h4. Okay, most of these games, I'm looking at them for the first time. But bishop takes c7, which does win a pawn. Probably has the problem that we can go knight d5. I think we're going to win the pawn right back with a very good game, because white has not finished development. We can't protect the bishop because we have a pin here, and the bishop will be lost. So bishop d6, we take it, then we attack it, he defends, and then we bring the other rook, attack it again, and black should have a fine game leading in development. So maybe white even has to watch out not to be worse here. So therefore he retreated the bishop to h4, and then came back to d5, and pawn to g3. Interesting move. He wants to put the bishop on g2. The thing is, if we play a pawn to e3 or e4, maybe we have to watch out not to get a good knight versus a bad bishop kind of situation. Like, okay, pawn to e4, I guess we take, and these pawns maybe do not make the best impression ever. And also with pawn e3, maybe we just take. Here white must watch out for black not getting a super strong knight here on d5. Let's say take. And now I think f5 is a strong move if you can make it. No, keeping this knight here on d5. Okay, so g3, pawn to h6. Now we're trying to trap this bishop. Pawn to e4, and bishop back to b7. Very interesting. Temporarily sacrificing this knight, but if we take, which he did, we attack the rook. And once the rook moves, we can play g5, trapping this guy. That's why we take the g5. However, the material will be equal once things settle down. Rook c1 attacking c7, pawn to c5. We can always take here when we want. And white selected to take on g5 right now, followed by pawn to f4. So it looks like white has slight initiative, but hasn't turned out. Rook g7. Black managed to defend here. King f8, if king f7, bishop h5 check, and we're going to take on f6 in better circumstances in the game. So king f8, if we take now we play king f7. If check now, we can take the pawn, and there shouldn't be any problems for black. King f8, we played h4 instead, pawn takes, and white has a slight initiative. He has a passed pawn here, and yeah, the more active rook. So bishop f3, he exchanges the bishops. Black had the more active bishop, so white exchanges his more passive bishop. So he has the more active rook here, and this is the pass pawn. But it turned out he couldn't make anything of it. He managed to win a pawn at some point here. The rook here, rook a7 check, rook takes. And the thing is, yeah, if rook takes e5, then we can win this pawn, like this. And if king takes, we can also win this pawn. Yeah, but I can just win this pawn. What he played was king d5 because he wants to defend this pawn. And the theme here is a little bit that all rook endings are drawn, and let's just play through this rather quickly here. White ended up winning this pawn, but it seems like black was active enough. Pawn to c4, pinning this pawn down. So now white only has this pawn to do something with, and it looks like Daniel was active enough to stop this pawn. The rook is active, attacking this pawn. And we're keeping the king at bay, can't really move. So back, attacking the pawn. Not much to be done. If we make a check, then the king approaches and we try and win the pawn. So a little bit of back and forth here, back to a1. Again, back to a1, rook a8. And now we can bring the king. And we're trying to win the pawn, so king here, and now check. King must go back to a1, trying to take the pawn. So king back to c3, not check. If king d2 king d2 would just repeat, so I went king b4. But now rook c2 attacking this pawn. And we're active enough here. a7, king b7. The pawn will be lost. He can play this because we can't take the queen, so we take the pawn. But this is the, well, one of the most elementary draws you can think of. Black can simply put the king on e8 and the rook on the 8th rank and move it back and forth. And yeah, it's an easy draw, and I'm surprised that they even played on here. But slowly but surely, the kings remained on board, and we can't do much here. Okay, so moving on to Ramirez against Shankland. Two very strong players. Last year, Ramirez, I think he made the playoff against Kamsky, which, yeah, quite an achievement. I think he's quite a strong player, but I would guess he's like the fifth seed, you know, in my mind. It's Kamsky, Onichuk, Gariev, Kopian, something like that. I mean, but there are plenty of other strong players like Robson and Arenberg, which will be our next game. But okay, Ramirez Shankland. I have not seen this game at all, so another 3. I believe Shankland always plays a Slav. And now it goes g6. Pawn takes c4, queen a4 check, immediately winning the pawn. So if white plays, yeah, d4, we're starting to resemble more like a Fianchetto Grunfeld, but he goes d3. So we're more like, after e5, I would say we're in more like reverse dragon territory. Bishop g4 played. Let's see 3. Bishop takes f3. Black might think about 95, which looks like it should be equalized. 95. Take on f3. Plays on like c6. Yeah. Yeah. Already this looks rather equalish. So rook c1. White wants to play probably on the queen side. At some point try and get a minority attack going, but knight d5. Offering a trade. Well, this went to rook b1. Wants to go for this minority attack, that's my guess. So rook d8. Pawn b4, okay. The minority attack arrives. Bishop takes c3. Bishop takes c3. Does he take? No, queen d5. So an attack on the a2 pawn, so white is probably forced to exchange queen here. Queen takes. And now, what do we take with? Probably the rook. If you take with a pawn, bishop takes g7, and then the rook can enter on the 7th. So my guess is rook takes d5. Yeah. Bishop takes g7, king takes. And still white wants to achieve the minority attack. But with only rooks remaining, it's not looking like much. a4, rook d8, rook c3, e5. Yeah, I'm wondering if black can think about e4 at some point. Probably that's unnecessary. He's just gaining some space here with e5. So f3. Okay, he wants to prevent e4. Probably thought that it was a threat. Maybe it was a threat. Now that I think about it, if it was black to move, maybe he can play e4. How do I remove the arrow? Remove the arrow. If we play e4, pawn takes. This rook to d1. This one has no take. This one takes back. And the king moves. And we go rook on d1. And we move back to d4. Remember, we had the pawn on e4. Pawn on d4, move back, rook back to d4, and we're attacking 2 pawns. So maybe, e4 was an idea. So f3, king f6. This is an endgame, so they bring the king to the center. But it looks like there's not much going on. King f3, king e6, h4. Double rook endgame, equal pawns. And it wouldn't surprise me to see repetition quite soon. He takes on e5, rook b4, and the game is drawn. Not much to be done. With the king d5, probably d4. Probably. And this black rook is stuck to this b7 pawn. And the white rook kind of stuck on this d4 pawn. So not much that can be done, I think. So the 4th draw in 4 games. Will we have some decisive results? Yes, finally. In this game, I briefly looked at, it's Robson against Ehrenburg. Sergei Ehrenburg, originally from Israel, but I think he's been living for quite a while, quite a long time now in the United States. So they played the Petrov defense. Yeah, to my mind, I think Ehrenburg has been playing with Karakan a lot. So probably a solid player. But yeah, this knight c3 variation, where white usually goes bishop e3 or bishop f4, queen to2, castle queenside. And that's what happened, bishop e3. And yeah, this Robson guy tends to be, let's say he's quite a theoretical player, knows his lines pretty well. And h4, well, this signals that white wants to attack on the king side, so Sergei decided to attack his king on the queen side as well. So looks like a solid position for black here. Bishop g5, pawn takes, bishop g4, and rook c1, interesting move. Unpinning the knight, so next move is something like knight d4, so he took an f3. But now we have this imbalance, bishop against knight. I mean, white has some double pawns, but it doesn't seem to be an issue. After f6 he plays f4, and these pawns are doing a good job of keeping the king safe. Don't have to worry about the king, and it's not so easy for black to attack these pawns. So yeah, this bishop will definitely go to this g2 square, to this diagonal. Also some ideas of bishop h3 in some lines, but maybe not immediately. If takes, then bishop h3 is, if takes, bishop h3 becomes a threat. So king b8, moving the the king out of the danger here on this diagonal. Bishop g2, rook f8, anticipating the opening of the f-file. b7, c4, and let's see. Opens the f-file, but first the radical rook. A nice rook maneuver, activating the rook on the queen side. So c6 had to be played because of the pressure on this. Takes c5. Attacking the bishop, which moves, and no big discoveries with the knight. This is protected. No worries for white. But later in the game, g6, bishop h5. Here white has sacrificed a pawn. And here he sacrifices another pawn. So at the moment, white is down 2 pawns. So he has to make something happen. For white to move, he went rook d7 into h4. And we'd like to play rook e7, but at the moment, there are back rank issues. So queen a5. And this threatens queen c7 with checkmate, so black is more or less forced to react to that. So we play rook c8. But now at least we got 1 pawn back. So black is up a pawn, but we have some pressure. And I briefly checked this position with the computer, and the computer it said the positions are around equal, but it looks like black has some issues to deal with, and in fact he blundered here immediately with queen to g5. And the amazing thing is that this game is over. It's like +5 on the computer, queen b4. The threatened mate here. Black on b6. Let's have a look. It's something like queen b5, trying to trade. Queen f4 check. We can't interpose anything, and here the black rank is simply too weak, and we can't do anything. We move the rook d8, and even if we move here, then rook d8, and nothing can be defended. So what do we do? So he tried b6, then came a4, and yeah, it's pretty amazing. Now we're just making loot for the king, so now rook e7 becomes a threat, and black can't do anything. You want c5, queen b5, and again this move is coming. What do? You want rook c6, but now, okay, we're threatening right field, but now left field, queen a6, coming into this b7 square, and not much that can be done. He went rook c7, rook takes. If rook takes, which it didn't do, then it's mate immediately. We can impose the queen and the rook, then mate. So king takes, but now we're taking everything with check. Queen check, another queen check. And now white is still attacking and off a pawn. And after rook d1 he resigned. Any move that we choose on the e-file, we're going to lose the rook. Here, pick up the rook. And if king e7, queen check, picking up the rook. So Sergey decided to throw in the towel. So a nice win for Ray Robson, who moves into the lead. And there he will be joined by Alexanderman, who defeated Joshua Farrell with the black pieces. I have not seen this game. So Joshua opens with the English. Classical development here with g3 and bishop d2 as advocated in recent theoretical manuals by Mikhail Marin, and also in some old ones like the Dynamic English by Kosten. Lendeman goes for this King's Indian setup here, which is quite common. Joshua likes to go for e3, which usually is followed by knight to e2. Other ways to play are with knight f3, and it doesn't really matter what black does. We go d3, castles rook b1. Classical development. The other way to play is to play e4, the bottling system, and this is what Marin recommended after 92 castles d3. You know, we have a complicated strategical struggle, but just went for pawn to e3. d6, the knight most likely goes to e2, f6. And here you can also play with d3, rook b1. Similar positions, but slightly different. I think the main difference is once black goes for his attack with knight h5, f5, white can counter with f4, trying to blunt everything and then try and go on the queen side. Let's see what happened. He goes for this quiet approach, d3, bishop e6, knight to d5. Yeah, he wants to post the knight here on d5. This knight is ready to come to c3. Meanwhile, black usually goes for something like queen d7, bishop h3 for his counterplay. That's what it does. Could play knight c3 immediately. Rook b1 is also always an idea. Plays knight c3. And here he goes, knight f6. Yeah, we can't go bishop h3 immediately because... hang on a minute. Yeah, maybe we take first? Probably take, and the bishop has to go to d8. Because if we go to g7, then we can take. And c7 hangs. If we take immediately on c7, then knight g4. That's why I took an f6 first. Something like this. So he goes knight e8 first, attacking this. Now we can play this, and now the f pawn is also ready to move. Into a4. Interesting. Does he want to play b4 with the queen protecting? Usually we go rook b1 here. So let's see what happens. Bishop a3, yeah. Wondering what white's idea here is with queen a4. Bishop takes, king takes. Still white wants to play on the queen side. But again, black wants to attack on the queen side. Rook f7. Yeah, multi-purpose move. At some point we might double here. At some point we might need the bishop for protection of d6. At some point the rook might swing over. So many ideas for this move. f4, pawn takes. Yeah, and now the Turetsky rule. Turetsky said when you take on f4, this is basically like the close Sicilians. Close Sicilian with colors reversed. And if e takes f4, usually you go g takes f4, and if g takes f4, you go e takes f4. That's some kind of a rule of thumb that Mark Dvoretsky came up with in one of his books. So knight f6 takes, probably knight d5, no, then this hangs. Oh, then rook e1, so maybe knight d5. Bishop back. And how do we proceed here with white? Back to b3, attacking this guy. Okay, b6 is a slight weakening, but what can you do? It's b6 over b8. Knight d8, okay. Yeah, this also prepares c6, taking the knight. Bishop c3, c6, taking the knight. What do we do? Taking d7. Takes a d5, interesting. So he's going to allow white to keep his bishop, which at the moment looks dangerous because of this diagonal, but what happens? Bishop comes back, takes on c4. And probably we must take with the pawn. No, the queen. Because if pawn takes, then this square looks really weak. We can post a rook there, we can post a knight there. So I think queen takes. King c6 check. He has to take. Yeah, and since we exchanged the queens, then most of the power of this diagonal is gone. So now it's about the imbalance here, bishop versus knight, and let's see what happens. h4, h5, and yeah, this is easily protected with the king at some point, king f7. So now the question is, what does black do here? Rook d8, anticipating e5 when we take, and this is hanging. So prophylactic move, no e5 for white. Rook f3, prophylaxis against prophylaxis, no, this is protected, so maybe white wants to play e5 on the next move. h7, a4. Didn't want to play e5, a6. Notice that black is putting most of his pawns on a light square. On the light squares, trying to yeah, not be targets for this bishop. Black is trying to get control at some point of the light squares. Knight e7. So here it would be a great mistake to take on f5 because knight takes and black has all that he wants. A nice knight on a light square. That's what he wants. So the question is, does white black want to play d5 at some point? Maybe take on e4 and play b5, try and get this f5 square. No. So they're kind of moving back and forth here, keeping the tension. Let's just move to a point where something actually happens in this game. Rook c8, rook c6, and pawn takes. Okay. Does he want to play d5 now and get this f5 square for knight? That's my guess. But okay, we have to look out for e5, e6 check. So d5, e5, knight f5, then e6. So what do we do? Rook to c4. Rook here. And now finally d5. a5. Well, this pawn's actually hanging, which I missed. So after rook here, this is hanging. What happens if we take? What happens if we take? And pawn to e5, attacking this, threatening this. Yeah, probably can't meet both threats, so e5. a5, and pawn takes e4 check. But now hasn't black just won a pawn. This is weird. This is weird. I'm gonna take on f4. Yeah, even this. Yeah, well, it's just too many pawns hanging, so black's gonna win a pawn. Looks like white is blundered here at some point. Maybe even, yeah, around here maybe. Yeah, so this looked like, you know, a complex game. Where black just slightly outplayed him during the end here. Now he's gonna win a pawn. He's gonna be a pawn and yeah, blockade here. King can't enter, so the extra pawn is most likely going to decide the game. Outside pass pawn, constant defense needed in this one. Yeah, and he can sacrifice the pawn, get this, and now we have a pass pawn, and the king can run and pick up some pawns. So this looks reasonable. Yeah, that makes sense. So yeah, those were all the men's games, and this means that Lenderman and Robson move into the lead. But okay, it's still early, and yeah, hard to tell. I'm gonna have a quick look at the women's games. Uh, In recent years, this has been a battle between Irina Krush, who is now a grandmaster, and Anna Santonsky, who is an international master, rated about 2470. And usually it's been a race between those two. Um, but let's hope that we can have some players joining the race this year. Tatiev Abrahamian has been doing quite well recently. She got an IM norm in the recent Reykjavik Open, and I think she is close to being an IM now. But first, let's look at Katerina Nemkova against Irina Krush. So Krush with the black pieces, and yeah, at this rating range, 200 points. It's always interesting to see how the high-rated player goes about uh, outplaying his opponent. So she just goes for classical Sicilian development here, e6 and d6, which I think we can call the Scheveningen formation. Queen b2, queen c7. I'm not really well versed in the different kind of setup in the Sicilian, but let's see, knight a5. Usually, okay, white wants to attack on the king side and black on the queen side. So knight a5. Sometimes we take this bishop. Sometimes we play b5 and play knight c4. Let's see what happens here. b5. So black hasn't castled yet, so maybe this attack here will not bite on anything yet, but in the end, usually black castles anyway because can't really castle on the queen side. So knight takes b3, so now black has captured the bishop pair. And okay, you always have to look at forcing moves here. And right now b4 looks like too much. We take on f6, take on c3, take on e7. I don't see the compensation, so most likely the knight moves, knight d7, onto f4, onto b4, knight goes to a4, trying to blunt the black counterplay here on the queen side. Bishop b7, we're attacking this guy. And maybe knight c5 might come at some point when we have the bishop pair. And yeah, let's see what we have. Bishop takes b4, we can take on e4. That's what he did. So now black has the bishop pair, we have captured a center pawn. So now this is looking quite nice, because in general the endgames are good for black in the Sicilian, because he has more central control with the pawns. So rook f1. So if black can play something like g6, it looks quite solid for black. Castles, yeah, not sure what white is doing here. a5, taking this bishop, and yeah, if we had to go to a3, that's just a horrible square. So knight b5, trying to get a counter attack on this, but it seems to be defended well enough. This looks kind of weird for white. I mean, if you play bishop a3, can we just take on c3 and play bishop a6? Because you can't take with the knight. Might be an idea. That's what she did, so maybe she has to take with the pawn. Because if knight takes... Man, I'm off with the errors, man. If knight takes, then maybe even this just winning an exchange. Winning the exchange, so... Uh-oh. Looks like she took with knight. And she played bishop a6, okay. So white just sacrificed the exchange, trying to get an attack here. But this piece here is just horrible. The only idea for white is something like this. But I think black should be in time here to defend. Queen a7. What was this square with check? Activating the queen. d5. Exchanging bishops. Yeah, if you can't get, a queen and a rook battery going, then... I mean, okay, f5. Doesn't look like it can be Too dangerous. Okay, white is going for it here with the contemplate, but let's see. Pawn takes e6, queen e3 check. And we can take with a pawn. Yes, yeah. And I think we're not many moves away from resignation. White doesn't even have a pawn for the exchange. g6, yeah. How best to defend here? Probably not move anything. That's my guess. That's my guess. Maybe d4, d3, something like that. Okay, she took. Okay, that's surprising me, but rook f6, queen a4. Must have got check here, but it's not even dangerous. Yeah, now simply queen g1. Taking up this guy here. Boom, shakalaka. Boom, shakalaka. And another pawn bites the dust. King is safe. Rook is coming here. This is winning for black. Rook h6. I'm surprised they're still playing. But okay, quick look here. It's absolutely completely winning for black. Somehow they played a bunch of moves, but after this, queen takes knight, and then a new queen. White finally resigned. Okay, quick look at okay, Shenyuk, Satonsky want to draw. Just a really quick look, because this is becoming a really long video. So, quick look, Queen's Indian. Shenyuk against Satonsky. So, an isolated pawn here looks solid for white. Some exchanges. Lining up against the isolated pawn. Bishop e5. This looks good for white. Takes d5. So looks like black had to work for the draw here. He's down a pawn here in the rook ending, so she had to earn her draw here definitely. But yeah, all rook endings tend to be drawn, and this one doesn't seem to be an exception. The thing with the a pawn is, if you move to a7 and black king keeps the king here, it's going to be a draw. And the thing here is, black will counterattack these pawns if the white king attempts to move. So you can only put the pawn on the 6th. You can't put it on the 7th. Then it's that draw. But the problem is, as long as it's on the 6th, and you try to bring the king, then you have time to take the pawn on g4 and come back to the a file before you move to a7. So you can't really do much. And okay, yeah. White didn't even try to win here, so they just agreed to a draw. So Abrahamian against Marquina. The Italian game, quiet opening, rook e1. And white usually maneuvers something like this, knight here, pawn to h3. And bishop c2, trying to keep the bishop. I mean, this shouldn't be an issue for black here. Finally, the knight goes to f1, bishop d2. Quiet development here. That's usually what happens in the Italian game. Finally, g4. Aggressive. Knight f4. We take pawn takes, opens up the rook. But we have to take f1, bishop back. So what's going on? Pawns are equal. Yeah, I'm not sure. I can take this, but there's well, let's start discovery. She went d4, so now this is threatened, but we might have bishop c4. That's what it did. Bishop d3, and h4. Yeah, now there's some weaknesses on the light squares. So maybe black is being Slowly outplayed here, losing a pawn. Yeah, she had to move the bishop because knight takes bishop c4. And then we have time to make things happen and defend our pawns here. Okay, there's a threat here. Well, there on f3. We might be able to sack the exchange with pawn takes b4. But yeah, this is more simple, f4. Attacking the square indirectly, attacking the knight. And once the knight moves, probably pawn takes b4 and white is up a bunch of pawns. a5 is the only idea, but then probably c6, queen b5. Yeah. Just defending this pawn and then there are no issues. Yeah, white is up too many pawns here. You know, hint of counterplay here, but probably not enough. And now, some counterplay, but definitely not enough with this pawn. Which looks like it's gonna run off the board. King somewhere, e7, there are no jacks, e7 resigns my prediction. And then correct. So, for sure against Camille Badinskite. Very quick look at this one. Another Nimso. So we can't have a deep look at all the games, so just a quick look here. Black looks to have strong control of this d5 square, but what happens? For this d5 square, he gave up the bishop pair. White has the bishop pair. Wants to attack. So white has many attacking ideas here. This bishop is dangerous. Attack here. Rook's here. Rook lift. So it looks quite dangerous. f5. It seems to be quite dangerous. And would not surprise me to see a tactical blow here. We can take an f7. King takes, queen takes e7. That's one idea. That's what he did. Yeah. So rook e8. If here, then probably this is because rook in here. Looking back. How to continue here? Still anything devastating? Maybe this? No, but then it takes a b3. Yes, I'm not sure. Not sure. I mean, this looks forced, but I'm not sure how it continue. I mean, oh, this is protected. I forgot. Okay, we can play this. Wow, forgot this rook. The bishop is protected. We can play this. We can't take still because of the pin here. There's a pin. But we can take a yeah. We can take a b3. Took the bishop. I would take this. Okay, and then we take. No, 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 no. I'm full of. I can't see anything. Maybe rook e6. Still we take. No, but now we can take on d8. Yeah. So this is complicated. I mean, they spend a lot of time here. White won the exchange. And if the queen moves, then I think something like this comes into consideration. And maybe here just try and move the rook over. Move the rook over and let Johnny take over. I mean, there's some ideas. I mean, it's hard to, you know, calculate something on the fly that they have to calculate during a long game like this. So, okay, well, black is on a piece at the moment. But we regain it here immediately. And a pawn here on b7. Could have taken the exchange here, but likes to go bishop c6 and take the exchange on e8. And yeah, what is just up the exchange here? Save king. Should be an easy win for white. That's what happened. And finally, the last game with the black pieces. Eswaran, National Master. I think she's 13 years old. So she opened up her debut US Chess Championship with a victory against WIM Ni. And this was what the Queen's Gambit declined. No, yeah, more or less, but transposition. Queen's Gambit declined. And things got interesting around here, rook g6 and queen g4. Black is getting some activity here. And bishop c8. She wants to bring the bishop to f5. And it looks like white has messed up here because we can take on f5, winning a pawn. And we keep tremendous activity here. Yeah. White did mess up, sorry, black did mess up at this point though. And white should be better here because he just wins the queen. And black doesn't really have enough compensation. But white started to mess up. She sacked the pawn here, and that wasn't really necessary because now black can get a better version of this endgame. And black has some weak pawns, but also some very strong pawns. Double connected pass pawns. And white doesn't really have anything too dangerous going at the moment. So it's all about these two connected pass pawns. Can black do anything with them? And it turned out that she actually could. On to h4. At the moment, okay, she gave up one pawn, but now this bishop is well anchored on c4, and we can think about advancing our pawns. And white is gonna run here because this is just protected here. Bring up bishop d5, and to get this pawn, white has given up this pawn, and these are really dangerous. So actually, this game was full of blunders, but in the end, black managed to find the win. They repeated here for a while, but then black decided, okay, I want to play for a win with e5, and that's indeed, I think, winning after bishop c4. Quite a strong threat here of checkmate, and the king here. We're simply moving the pawns here, marching them down the board, and that's what happened, bishop d5 check. But she could have won immediately with h3, when there's really nothing better than yeah, resignation, to be honest. But bishop d5, she won the pawn. And here it's still not clear. Probably black is better. I'm not sure if she's winning. I haven't had time to look at it. But like here, white can play, well, I mean, something like this. Maybe. We'll start with e6. I mean, this is always an idea because we have stalemate. And h2 we can just take because it's a draw. But instead, white allowed bishop e2, and now h2 is just coming. Nothing to be done, h2, and after bishop f1, it's time to resign. King h3, mate is threatened, white can't do anything. So a nice win for Eswaran, who seems to be a nice talent, but yeah, quite a long video. I'd like your input on how you'd like me to do the coverage here. I'm not sure how long this video is, probably about an hour now, so perhaps it's too much to look at all the games, but no, I'd like your input. Please leave some comments and tell me how you'd like this to be done, and I'll see you later in the US Chess Championship 2014. Bye bye.